Hello, and today we're having a little break from my Edwardian outfit because the Vintage Sewing Pattern Company, who are so supportive of all us vintage sewers, have launched their own challenge, October Sews, and I'm going to be sewing this pattern, an Art Deco 1930s pattern that I've had my eye on for a while because it completely makes me think of Miss Lemon, you know, the Pauline Moran, was that what she was called? Pauline Moran in the David Suchet version of Poirot, wore 30s dresses just like these. So I'm really looking forward to having a go. I've got some 1930s crepe silk fabric I got from Donna Flower Fabrics. So it's going to be completely 1930s pattern, 1930s fabric. Before I start, I'm wearing a 1930s dress also made from vintage fabric by Donna Flower. And there is a video on making this dress, but the reason I'm wearing it today is because I don't know what's coming out with this dress pattern, but I wanted to show you that the construction of Art Deco 1930s dresses can be very different to the kind of construction that we're used to today. So I draw your attention to the sleeves, and when I was cutting out these sleeves, I was a bit nervous because they look like, show you, they look like some kind of 1980s futurist, but they're cut out like this, but then of course they drape like that, so there's nothing like a 1930s sleeve. Then the front, I actually haven't done up yet because I wanted to show you. It has this, so this is the right side of the fabric and everything, but then has this extra piece which they call a plastron, which then does up in a bow around your neck and joined at the back there, so it fits like that with the folds going over the front. And then you would often wear a jabot. This one, which my mother crocheted for me, detachable, so you could add this to any of your dresses that you wanted to. So that would go on. And it was really common to have a detachable jabot or collar that you could put on any dress if you wanted to. And before I get going on the Art Deco dress, which I'm really curious to see the construction technique of, I will just show you quickly the true vintage 1930s skull cap that I'm wearing. It has been handmade. It was made rather at home out of ribbon. I'm just going to turn around to show you. And these skull caps were really popular in the 30s and just sat, you know, well, skull cap sat on the back of the head. And because this one was made at home, I think at some stage, if you'd like, I might have a go at making one, and hopefully, if it goes well, showing you all how to make your own too. But today I'm going to get on with that dress in a gorgeous true vintage 30s polka dot olive green fabric. And of course we do tend to think of polka dots with the 1950s, but polka dots were super popular in the 1930s, so we'll see how it goes. The pattern says I'm going to need 4 meters, 4 yards, and I only have 3, and it is doubled over because some of the pattern pieces are cut in the fold, but you can see it's really narrow. I mean, vintage fabrics are more narrow, but this 1930s piece is kind of extra narrow, and you can see that's the sleeve piece. Yes, so I'm gonna lay them out and see if it's going to be possible, but it might be a bit of a challenge, and I'm feeling a little anxious about it because I really want to make the pattern in this 1930s silk. So the instructions are this, so there's no illustrations, which is fine. It's just cutting out and making up instructions, and some of the pieces, like the tie, etc., you just have instructions for the measurements. You don't have a pattern piece. So I've decided to go for it, and if I need to cut a little bit off the length of the skirt or alter the fullness of the skirt, so be it. But I'm determined to make this dress out of the polka dot silk. And you can see that I've just taken a bit of the width off the bodice pattern pieces, and that's because this pattern is actually a size or two too big for me. So I've literally just pleated that pattern piece to just take some of that width out. And the tie I'm going to do with contrast fabric. So I'm just showing you, this is actually a vintage napkin, a sort of damask napkin, but I like it because, one, I got it really cheaply from a charity shop, thrift store, and two, it's just that not bright white ivory colour that will just pick out the polka dots. And they're not like a modern bright white, they are a very kind of dull ivory colour, which is just looks much more vintage, but it is more vintage. And then the collar piece is this rather interesting shape here, which is cut on the folds to create that rather wonderful collar. So that I'm going to cut out of this napkin. To show you what the front skirt is looking like at the moment, you can see that there's an inverted pleat that runs down the centre that I've top stitched, and then I've stopped top stitching just here, and the instructions are to create a little arrowhead here, and then there's like a little kick pleat that flares out in the front. And then if I turn the skirt over, you can see what that looks like on the underside. So the pleats that are drawn into the centre like that, and then top stitch really close. And then there are just two waist darts either side. And then this is the centre opening for the dress, and I'm just going to put a little bias cut placket on that so that it can be fastened up the front of the skirt and then into the front of the bodice. So here we have the bodice with the underarm dart stitched and the side seams and the shoulder seams done with French seams, and the instructions, which are both sketchy and confusing. So I think it's a very simple dress to make up. It's actually just the instructions make it confusing, but I don't think it needs to be. So you can see here that the instructions say to cut off the front part of the bodice, and then the only instructions are face in front edges and fasten with hooks and loops. I don't see why that needs to be cut off and then stitched on again. I'm missing something. So I'm just going to turn it. I've tried it on and it looks fun. I'm just going to turn that front edge over to form a facing, and I'll probably put a very lightweight interfacing in, turn under the front edge a little to hem it, and then it's just fastened with hooks and eyes up the front, overlapping slightly. So that seems to work fine. And then for the sleeve, I did find some instructions for the sleeve on the other day dress pattern, and it simply says, I've done it flat, but it says to stitch the sleeve seam, arrange top fullness into 5 pleats as per notches. So there are 5 notches, and what I've done is from the top side I have pleated the fabric outside from the top, and you can see that I've done it so that the top pleat will be aligned with the shoulder seam, and then there's an equal distance between the two other pleats as they fan out from the top. For the waistband, it simply says mount waist edges of bodice and skirt onto a petersham band. Narrowly hem edges of outside waistband, i.e. this one that sits on the top. Gather the ends, face them in and hook them at the left side. And I always think, if in doubt, look at the pattern. There looks to be a separate waistband, so I think that petersham band does need to be covered in the fabric of the dress. I'm going to make the outside waistband across the front there and then fasten at the sides. Now I'm going to cut out the tie, and there isn't a pattern piece for the tie. You have this diagram here and the instructions to cut from single material, 20 inches long, 4 inches wide at the neck and 6 inches wide at the lower edge. And you can see in the diagram that the tie extends quite far down, so that's the 20 inches long for the tie. If I double check the bodice against that, you can see that's the bodice, so the tie extends about 6 or 7 inches below the bodice. So you start with a long rectangle and the tie is 4 inches at the top and 6 inches at the bottom. What I've done is I've marked an inch in either side here, and then I'm just going to draw an even line to radiate out at each side to get the shape of my tie. So I'm working on the bodice and the skirt separately to keep everything as small as possible and easy to work with. So I've got my bodice here with the sleeves sewn in. You can see the pleats there on the upper part of the bodice, but I wanted to show you how to do the fastenings. So in a lot of vintage garments there's a combination of hooks and eyes and poppers or snap fasteners, and the general principle is that they both do separate things. If you can hear tapping, by the way, it's because it's pouring with rain on the roof. So for hooks and eyes, they are best placed where there's going to be a strain on the garments. So hooks and eyes, if there's strain, they stay fastened, but if they're loose, then hooks and eyes will come undone. So you want to put hooks and eyes on the areas of greatest strain, which is probably, if you're anything like me, around your middle and around the bust line. And poppers have the opposite quality, so they stay fastened if the garment is loose, but they're apt to unpop if there's a strain put on them. So most vintage dressmaking books will recommend a combination of poppers and hooks and eyes, and that is also what you see on most vintage garments. So books will say do them alternately, and that's quite a good method. I don't necessarily do it alternately, I do it to common sense, but you can see here on the bodice I have done it alternately. So I've got a hook and then popper, hook, popper, hook. But I also wanted to show you a good method for making sure, so you want them to lie absolutely flat. So although you can measure, as you see I have done with the pins, and measure each side along and then sew the opposites like that, actually when you sew you're likely to alter things a millimetre here or there. So what you can do, you make sure that you have got the tops matching, the neckline matching like that. Then you take your tailor's chalk, so here I've sewn on a popper, mark tailor's chalk on that, and then I get it absolutely flat and I press down onto the base, and then when I lift it, you can see there is the tailor's chalk marking, so I know exactly where I want to sew on the match to that popper. So what I've done is I've sewn I think they're called the male parts, all the way down, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to transfer all the markings with tailor's chalk to the opposite side of the bodice, so that I know that I've got that line absolutely flat. So I had a bit of a change of heart about using the napkin for the tie and the collar, because the 30s polka dot fabric is such a lightweight chiffon that the linen of the damask napkin was just too heavy, I thought. So I raced up to the fabric district. I'm in London at the moment. I raced the fabric district which is not as impressive as it sounds, because it's actually 10 minutes walk away from where I am. And I bought this. It is 100% silk crinkle chiffon, and I think you can see it's in that creamy ivory colour, and I'm going to use it double for the collar and for the tie, and I think that will be much more airy and pretty, and it's actually better for the collar and the tie to be a lighter weight than the original crepe, than heavier. So I'm going to cut that out now. I'll just show you it against the fabric actually, so you can see what I mean. So this is the tie that I cut from the napkin, and you can see it's just not really working, I don't think. I can use the shape that I've done and I can use it for another project, but I think it's too heavy. I think you can't really see the weight of the silk, but it's really fine. So I think this is too heavy, and actually even the self pattern I don't think is working very well. So I'm going to use that as the template, and I'll put that tie on something else. And then just to show you the silk chiffon that I bought against this, I think the colour and the weight is just working an awful lot better, but it does mean that I've got to cut everything out and stitch it again. And that is with all the fastenings done up. So you can see with that chalk technique how nice and flat. I haven't even ironed it, or pressed it rather, yet. So even without pressing, you can see how all those fastenings are lining up to create a nice flat front. And the silk chiffon wasn't too awful to stitch, as long as I held it flat and went slowly. So to show you how to make the tie, and if you can hear weird battering noises, that is rain. So how you do it is, this is the end by the neck edge. You simply gather that, fold it over, gather a few inches down, I think. It doesn't say so, but I think you must do. And then you fold it over like that, and then you've created your false tie. And you can see that my dog is admiring my dress, or I like to think that she is anyway. And here I am, being my best Miss Lemon self. You can see the kick pleat at the front of the dress, and then it fastens up from there with that combination of hooks and eyes and poppers. And the front waistband just keeps your smart little tie in place, and that is hooked onto the left side, and just showing you those pleats on the shoulders, forming that kind of little puff on the shoulders, and this kind of large fancy quite clown-like colour that was so popular in the 30s, and that I just love those big fancy colours. And I love the tie tucking into the waistband. I think that's such a pretty little feature, and I don't think I've seen it anywhere but on 30s dresses. And just to remind you that the fabric is a true vintage 1930s fabric, and polka dots were completely the rage in the 1930s. I was so lucky to find some in this shade of green, which is one of my favourite shades of green. And the tie, if you're wondering how it attaches, it's simply stitched to the neckline at the top of the right side of the dress, over where the hooks and eyes are. And I'm just thinking I need my little pair of 1930s glasses. They are actually direct copies of 1930s glasses from the old glasses shop. And you can see the collar forms that little sort of square at the back, and the collar and the dress, the neckline is just finished in a strip of bias binding just to enclose those raw edges at the top. And I'm just showing you how that top waistband unfastens on the left side and then fastens again with a hook and eye. And I do hope that you've enjoyed seeing me make this dress and that you will like this video. And to be my most efficient secretary self, I'm just bringing out a vintage book with my glasses on. I hope you'll think I've done Miss Lemon proud.